Take the personality quiz result you still remember. Maybe it's a four-letter code. Maybe it's just the funny one from a job description, a first date, a group chat bio someone else wrote for you. You believe it describes you. It feels stable, permanent, yours. But the real answer is stranger than that. The moment you walk into a different room with different people, under different pressure, you might already be a slightly different person. Not fake, not lying, different. This isn't a trick of filtered photos or a curated bio. It runs much deeper than that. And once you see how deep it goes, you will never look at a personality quiz result the same way again. For most of the 20th century, psychologists treated personality like a fingerprint, fixed early, stable for life, measurable with the right questionnaire, and consistent everywhere you went. If you were conscientious, you'd be punctual at work, tidy at home, and reliable with friends, all in roughly equal measure. One trait, one person, one pattern, repeating everywhere. Then in 1968, a psychologist named Walter Mischel published a book that quietly detonated that assumption. He pulled together decades of studies measuring how consistent people's behavior actually was across different situations. Honesty, punctuality, sociability. And what he found embarrassed a lot of confident researchers. The correlations were weak. Someone scrupulously honest at school might cheat without hesitation in a private game. Someone warm and talkative at a party might barely speak at a family dinner 2 hours later. Personality, it turned out, did not predict behavior nearly as reliably as everyone had assumed. Why not? Because you don't perform your personality in a vacuum. You perform it inside a situation. And situations, it turns out, are far more powerful than most people give them credit for. Nobody demonstrated that more unsettlingly than Philip Zimbardo. In 1971, he built a fake prison in the basement of a university building and assigned ordinary students, screened beforehand for being healthy, average, and unremarkable, to play either guards or prisoners. Within days, some of the guards, students with no prior history of cruelty, escalated into humiliating and controlling behavior toward their peers. Some of the prisoners grew passive, anxious, and psychologically worn down. The study had to be shut down early, and it has since been scrutinized hard for its methods. But the core signal underneath it has held up in study after study since. The role you're placed in can override the traits you walked in with. Give a mild-mannered person a position of unchecked power and almost no accountability, and their usual trait profile stops predicting what they'll do. The situation takes the wheel. So which one is the real you? The version at a party, the version at a funeral, the version negotiating a raise, choosing every word carefully, the version alone in your car, singing badly, completely unwatched? Here's the reframe. Maybe that question was broken from the start. Maybe personality was never one fixed thing waiting to be discovered. Maybe it was always a range. Modern personality science has mostly resolved Mischel's paradox, not by throwing traits out entirely, but by getting far more precise about what a trait actually is. A trait isn't a script you follow identically in every room. It's closer to a baseline setting, a center of gravity you drift around depending on context, mood, and who else is in the room. An introvert isn't someone who is quiet in literally every situation on Earth. An introvert is someone whose resting baseline sits lower, who spends more energy sustaining outgoing behavior, and who recovers that energy in a very specific way afterward. That difference matters because in 1999, researchers Tanya Chartrand and John Barg ran a study that quietly proved how automatic this shifting really is. They had participants sit in a room with a stranger who was secretly instructed to fidget in small, specific ways, rubbing their face, shaking their foot. The participants had no idea they were being watched for it, and without noticing, without intending to, they started mirroring those same small movements back. Chartrand and Barg called it the chameleon effect. You don't consciously decide to sync your body language, your tone, even your mood to the people around you. It happens beneath the threshold of choice. You are built to adapt to your environment in real time, constantly, automatically, long before any personality quiz gets involved. which brings in one of the strangest, most personal ideas in this entire field. It's called free trait theory, developed by the psychologist Brian Little. His core claim is disarmingly simple. You are not limited to your fixed, biologically inherited traits. You can act out of character, temporarily and deliberately, in service of something you genuinely care about. He calls these free traits. Picture an introverted professor. On paper, according to every personality test they've ever taken, this person should avoid crowds, dread public speaking, and prefer solitude to social performance. And yet, 3 times a week, the same person walks into a lecture hall and becomes animated, expressive, magnetic. Not because the test was wrong about them, because they've adopted a free trait, temporarily overriding their biological baseline in service of a core personal project that matters to them, their students, their subject, their sense of purpose. But there's a catch, and it's the part almost nobody talks about. Free traits cost energy. Little describes something he calls a restorative niche, a space, a ritual, a stretch of solitary time the person needs afterward to recover, to let their real baseline breathe again. The animated professor might walk straight back to their office after class, close the door, and sit in total silence for 20 minutes. Not because they're secretly antisocial, because they just spent an hour being a slightly different version of themselves, and the bill has come due. Does any of that sound familiar? Think about the version of you at work. Decisive, assertive. On because the job demands it, because people are counting on you, because it genuinely matters to you. Then you get home, and something in you deflates. You don't want to make one more decision, answer one more message, perform one more ounce of competence. That's not you being fake at the office, and it's not you being lazy at home. That's a free trait being spent all day, and a restorative niche finally being claimed back. Or think about how you are with your oldest friend versus a work meeting versus your own parents. Different volume, different vocabulary, different jokes you'd risk telling, different topics you'd instinctively avoid. If someone secretly recorded all 3 versions of you and played them back without context, you might barely recognize your own rhythm from one clip to the next. And yet all 3 are you. None of them is the lie. There's a piece of behavioral genetics that fits neatly into this picture too. Twin studies, comparing identical twins raised apart with identical twins raised together, generally estimate that somewhere around 40 to 60% of the variation in personality traits between people traces back to genetics. That number gets repeated constantly, and it's usually misunderstood. People hear it and assume, so roughly half of my personality is fixed at birth, permanent, unchangeable. But that framing skips the more interesting half of the finding. If close to half the variation is genetic, then close to half is not. Half is built, shaped by the situations you were placed in, the roles you were handed or chose, the free traits you learned to deploy under pressure, and the restorative niches you learned, sometimes the hard way, to protect. You are not a fixed quantity that experience simply uncovers, one layer at a time, until the real you is finally revealed underneath. You are closer to a range, expressed differently depending on what's being demanded of you and which projects you've quietly decided are worth spending yourself on. So the next time you catch yourself acting out of character, quieter than usual at a gathering, louder than usual in a meeting, steadier than usual under pressure that should have rattled you, try not treating it as a contradiction. Try treating it as information, a signal about which rooms pull you back toward your biological center of gravity and which rooms ask you to spend a free trait, and how much recovery time you'll owe yourself once you leave. You still have that personality quiz result saved somewhere. Maybe it's still mostly true, but the next time you walk into a new room, pay attention to what actually happens inside you. You're not leaving your personality at the door behind you. You're building it in real time, one room, one project, one quiet recovery at a time.